Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Alberto, for your presentation. I am just realizing how long I am living in Madison. So it's my town, actually, because I live here more than in my birth town. Okay, so I would like to share some reflections about the bilingual education in the context of the Revolución Ciudadana in Ecuador. So I would like to focus on the silent war against indigenous language and knowledge in my country, because it is the issue actually by neglecting not supporting the bilingual education in Ecuador. So I would like to start with some paradoxes and questions about the Rafael Correa government. So internationally, Correa is in office since January 15 to 2007. He was supported by the political movement Alianza País, and his motto was Revolución Ciudadana, the citizen revolution. So internationally, the government of Revolución Ciudadana it's calling the attention because of the Ecuadorian Miracle. So many scholars and many universities and institutions are recognizing to this government because there are very huge and profound changes in the country. So Correa said when he visited Harvard University that democracy has been firmly established in Ecuador, not only democracy in the formal sense, but real democracy in terms of people's access to rights, equal opportunities, and dignified living conditions. This is the so-called Ecuadorian Miracle. So the government itself has assumed this label for itself. So the government is based, actions or programs are based on the program of Buen Vivir, the good living, the Plan Nacional of Good Living. Yeah. So this is a concept, translated concept from the Summa Causa. Yeah, just in the beginning of the government, the more used the word was the Summa Causa, which is a Kichwa word, trying to signify, to mean that a relationship with cultural and civilizatory ways of the Andean peoples. But little by little, this Kichwa word was abandoned in the past, and now it is more used the idea of Buen Vivir, and then everything the progressive ideas are put in within this concept of Buen Vivir. Yeah. So some facts. So within this Plan Nacional del Buen Vivir, the extreme one of the achievements of this government is the extreme poverty for the entire country has been reduced from 16.9% in 2006 to 8.6% in the 2014. Yeah, the other thing is the government investment in health care during 2007-2014 has been $9 million. So it is the same thing in education. Yeah, 2% of gross national product of Ecuador is being spent on higher education, and it is the second largest investment of any country in the world in higher education other than Denmark. Okay, so it is just in higher education. And then there is also a very huge investment in the other levels of the educational system. So 8 million students have received the scholarships. No. It is 8,000 students have received the scholarships to attend to the best schools in the world. So it is scholarships for supporting graduate students abroad. So thousands of students are distributed in different universities around the world. They are just getting a master's degree or PhD for returning to the country and support the universities at this moment. So there is a free education for all. So all children now get to go to the school for free. Even though it was free education always, but usually the schools used to charge some money for different expenses in the schools. It was not totally free. But now the government is just punishing the schools and the high schools that are charging this money. And then the government is putting this money in the schools' budgets. Then the university student numbers have also soared thanks to free university education being guaranteed in the Constitution. Ecuador now has the second highest levels of public investment in higher education in the world. So by April 2012, in a far-reaching effort to overhaul its higher education system, Ecuador closed 14 universities that the government determined that did not meet the basic academic standards. So it was a good thing, because there were more than 100 universities in the country doing anything less than educating in an academic way to the university. It was called the garage university, because they were working in a particular house even. So it was a disaster. So I knew this thing from 2 decades ago. So in 2009 it was pushed the first evaluation in the country, and then in this year 26 universities were closed by the CONEA, which is the Consejo Nacional de Evaluación. Within the Plan Nacional del Buen Vivir, the National Plan of Good Living, there was the good living is comprised of 93 goals, 11 policies, and 950 strategies guidelines to be completed by the end of President Correa's term in 2017. So it is a very huge and ambitious plan of the government. So in this context, these few facts I have mentioned has took to the international recognition of educational achievements. So just 2 cases that Correa received or was prized as a doctor honoris causa by the University of Chile, and the other doctor honoris causa by the University of Barcelona. You see there, I mean, he looks like Ginés de Sepúlveda or something. Yeah. So, and then the international institutions are speaking about the amazing Ecuadorian achievements in education in general. So in February 2008, Correa, So, what? Okay, so there is not showing everything. So, however, of this fact, so there are some conflicts in in Ecuador regarding the bilingual education. So I have mentioned these amazing issues and achievements just to contextualize the bilingual education. So because there is a kind of contradictory policies in relation to the education in general, but specifically in relation to the indigenous bilingual education. So the first thing is that in February 2008, Korea placed the National Directorate of Intercultural Bilingual Education, which was the top authority in bilingual education within the Ministry of Education, which has supported anti-mining movement under control of the Ministry of Education, thus undermining its autonomy. So the DNAIB, the National Directorate of Bilingual Education, was an institution with a relative autonomy within the Ministry of Education. So this autonomy was to design the curriculum, to produce educational resources, textbooks, etc. So, but it was always under the direction of the Ministry of Education. So, so this is the other side, and then in general terms, there is also a conflicting relation with CONAIE, which is the biggest organization, indigenous organization in the country, which is the Confederation of Nationalities, Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador. So just to show you, so one of the current leaders of the CONAIE said recently, for us as indigenous peoples who have lived here for millennia, it's not about having a big apartment with a plasma flat screen TV. Development means nothing to us if it doesn't protect the forest where our people have always lived, or allow us to continue to have clean water, forest, and air. And then it is fighting against the mining policies of the government. So, or maybe he is referring to the government interest in supporting the Kichwa and indigenous communities in the Amazon, just to reorganize the way of families live in the jungle. So this is an example. So the communities of the millennium. So the government is spending a lot of money just to organize these communities in the middle of the jungle by using the oil revenues, just to convince them that permit to exploit the petroleum or the oil in the jungle. So this is Pañacocha. It's located in Sucumbíos. So all of these communities or families living in this town were distributed through the jungle in this place, but now this is a kind of urbanized town. So it's a kind of modernization of the communities. So the official description of this picture says the oil revenues enabled the construction of the second millennium community, Pañacocha. So it's a kind of propaganda just to fight against the Yasunidos, which is a movement against the mining exploitations and especially in the Yasuni in the Amazon. So in this context, so I would like to present some sociocultural and sociolinguistic aspects. So this is my presentation, and brief historical overview of bilingual education in the country, and an analysis of bilingual education policies and practices, focusing especially on language policies and planning and educational resources and curriculum policies by the government. And I will finish it by some conclusions and challenges for bilingual education. Yeah, so regarding the sociocultural and sociolinguistic aspects of Ecuador, so we have a population of almost 15 million of people, yeah, according to the census of 2010. Within this large population, so there are 15 indigenous nationalities, from which the Kichwa nationality, it's the largest one. And then there are other indigenous communities which are very, very small. Some of them with very few families. Yeah, and they are very dangerous of disappearing in the few next years. So, and then considering the indigenous peoples and nationalities, it represents the 21%, yeah, within the whole national population. So this is the locations of indigenous nationalities. It's a little bit old map, but the representation it's good. So you can see in the highlands in the middle, it's distributed the Kichwa nationality or the Kichwa communities, and there are other parts of Kichwa communities in the Amazon, with different dialects. And then the small circles are representing the small nationalities in the Amazon and in the coast. So here the estimations of population is enlarged. So it's prepared by the CONAIE and the indigenous organizations, and just for example in Kichwa community, it's estimated at 3 million people. So it is a very contending issue, the statistics about the indigenous peoples. So yeah, so each of these nationalities, so these peoples has a different language and different culture, and located in different territories. So now the historical overview of bilingual education. So it is very, very important because the bilingual education was not a gift from any government. So it has a history, very long history, but I would like just to mention some landmarks, especially in the last century. So the concerns about indigenous education have been part of elite discourses since colonial times. So usually the education was thought as a civilization, yeah, and then the Spanish language was the language of civilization, yeah. So in this context of the debates on indigenous education in the liberal revolution, it is by the end of the 19th century, concluded that indigenous must be civilized by means of Castellanization, so Hispanization. Okay, so it was in the beginning of the 19th century, so the liberal revolution in Ecuador. So there were a very huge, intense debate about what to do with indigenous communities, indigenous peoples, and their cultures, and language, and especially language, because it was not considered that the indigenous had a culture. Yeah. So what to do with indigenous language, considering that in this time, so the majority of the population was indigenous. Yeah, just the Kichwa communities were more than mestizos or blanco mestizos. Yeah, so it it is it has there is a kind of parallelism between the liberal revolution and the current government in Ecuador. So now there is a debate about indigenous language too, and the Correa himself speaks a little bit Kichwa, and he is claiming always the indigenous culture and language, and thinking about himself. I was very supportive to the language and trying to speak in any event with indigenous peoples. And then in the liberal context, it was the same. But Alfaro and the liberal government did not speak Kichwa, but there was a very known and famous expert in Kichwa, Luis Cordero Crespo, and he was president of Ecuador too. And then he wrote some Kichwa dictionaries and compiled some Kichwa songs, poetry from Kichwa communities, and he was consulted what to do with Kichwa in the context of the revolution. And he said, Luis Cordero said, Kichwa, it's a very nice language. It is similar to Latin. It's a very ductile, nice, sweet language. But you have to teach in Spanish, because this is the language of civilization. Yeah? And then the liberal governments just ordered to the hacendados, the landlords, just to open schools within the haciendas, just to educate the workers' children in there. So it never happened almost until the decade of the 1970s. So it is some policies from above, right? So, but there was also educational concerns from below, and this is the more interesting thing. So during the decades of 1940s to 1960s, there was some indigenous schools. So it was not a bilingual school, it was indigenous schools, in the sense that these schools were taught by Kichwa teachers who taught in Kichwa language. So using the language, the Kichwa language as language of instruction. Yeah. And this was a project supported by the leftist parties, and especially the Communist Party in Ecuador. Yeah? So a group of teachers were trained by the leftist experts, teachers, and then they used to teach within the haciendas, sometimes in a clandestine way, because the hacendados were always persecuting these schools. But they didn't have money. They didn't have money just as to keep working. But they lasted almost 20 years. So by the beginning of the 1960s, these schools of Dolores Cacuango, who was a leader of the communities of the northern Ecuador, just were assumed by the state. Yeah, became state schools. So in the second half of the 1960s, labor for itself. So the government is based, actions or programs are based on the program of Buen Vivir, the good living, the Plan Nacional of Good Living. Yeah. So this is a concept, translated concept from the summa causa. Yeah, just in the beginning of the government, the more used the word was the summa causa, which is a Kichwa word. He was supported by the political movement Alianza País, and his motto was Revolución Ciudadana, the citizen revolution. So internationally, the government of Revolución Ciudadana is it's calling the attention because of the Ecuadorian Miracle. So many scholars and many universities and institutions are recognizing to this government and knowledge in my country, because it is the issue actually by neglecting the not supporting the bilingual education in Ecuador. So I would like to start with some paradoxes and questions about the Rafael Correa government. So internationally, Correa is in office since January 15 to 2007, because there are very huge and profound changes in the country. So Correa said when he visited Harvard University that democracy has been firmly established in Ecuador, not only democracy in the formal sense, but real democracy in terms of people's access to rights, equal opportunities, and dignified living conditions. This is the so-called Ecuadorian Miracle. So the government itself has assumed these. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Alberto, for your presentation. I am just realizing how long I am living in Madison. So it's my town actually, because I live here more than in my birth town. Okay, so I would like to share some reflections about the bilingual education in the context of the Revolución Ciudadana in Ecuador. So I would like to focus on the silent war against indigenous language